Good morning, everyone. I'm Kat, and today I will be talking about parturition, or childbirth. So let's get started. Medically, this is defined as a physiological process in which products of conception, including the fetus, umbilical cord, and placenta, are expelled from the uterus. First, I'm going to talk about some of the bones and muscles involved in this amazing process. There are a lot that are involved, so I'm going to focus on what most women are talking about. So to start is the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is formed mainly by an extensive muscle called the levator ani, which is bordered by four bony landmarks: the pubic symphysis anteriorly, the coccyx posteriorly, and the ischial tuberosity laterally. Like we talked about in class, the muscle of the pelvic floor aids in our posture, sexual arousal, and provides support to the bladder and bowels. It is also innervated by the pudendal nerve, which branches off the sacral plexus. During childbirth, the pelvic floor acts to guide the baby's head down the birth canal during birth. As a result of childbirth, oftentimes these muscles get stretched out or even torn, which alter the woman's ability to efficiently control bladder and bowel movements. Yikes. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the bones involved in childbirth. The pelvis as a whole is the focus of childbirth, as it is the framework for the pelvic floor. And because this is a large component of childbirth, women and men have differences in their pelvis. So, for women, the subpubic angle is greater, the iliac crest is shorter, the pubic outlet or birth canal is much larger, and the acetabulum is more anterior, as you can see by the picture on the screen. I want to talk about the baby's head as well. Their skull is pretty impressive. So specifically, the coronal suture, sagittal suture, lambdoid suture, and squamous suture are not fully formed, and thus fontanelles are present. Fontanelles are spaces in between the sutures where ossification is not complete. Because the sutures are not completely ossified and these fontanelles are present, the skull of the baby can become more compact to allow for travel through the birth canal. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the planes and axes of motion pertaining to labor and delivery. So if you remember, you have the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane. Movements in the sagittal plane typically consist of forward and backward movements. So for labor and delivery, this would be the physical delivery of the baby through the birth canal. Next, the frontal plane. The frontal plane, or movements in the frontal plane, typically consist of lateral movements, so right to left. And in the womb, the baby is definitely making right to left lateral movements, definitely throughout its term, and certainly right before it's delivered. Next, I want to talk about the transverse plane, which would be rotational movement, just like the baby's rotation as it prepares for delivery. The ideal position for a baby for delivery is called the cephalic presentation. This is where the baby is positioned head down, facing the mother's back, with the chin tucked to its chest and the back of the head ready to enter the pelvis. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the nerve tracts involved in labor and delivery. The primary sensory tract for labor and delivery would be the gracillae fasciculus tract, as it carries signals from the mid-thoracic and lower parts of the body and carries signals for deep touch and visceral pain, or contractions during labor. The placenta itself does not have nerves, so the nociceptors, or pain receptors, are receiving inputs from the uterus contractions. The first-order neurons would be the ones in the gracillae fasciculus tract that detect the contractions, and the signal is carried on the ipsilateral to cuneate nucleoside of the medulla oblongata. The second-order neurons desiccate, forming the medial lemniscus, which leads to the thalamus. The third-order neurons take the signal to the cerebral cortex. However, many women seek out an epidural. An epidural blocks afferent nerve fibers from reaching the spinal cord. Essentially, the first-order neurons in the gracillae fasciculus tract are blocked. Next, I'm going to talk about the motor tract, which in this case, for labor and delivery, would be the corticospinal tract. This tract is responsible for carrying signals from the cerebral cortex for precise, finely coordinated movements. This tract is used to tell mom to activate the rectus abdominis, the transverse abdominal muscles, and other muscles of the abdomen to deliver the baby. Next, we're going to talk about the brain's role in labor and delivery. Labor and delivery, and kind of pregnancy as a whole, is really just a result of a synergistic relationship of pregnancy hormones, including estrogen, progesterone, and oxytocin. For the most part, during labor and throughout pregnancy, estrogen and progesterone are released and produced by the ovaries. Oxytocin, the hormone that stimulates uterine contractions, is made by the pituitary gland. And as you can see by the picture on the screen, it is located between the hypothalamus and the pineal gland. Next, I want to talk about a very important and significant experiment that I read about. The results showed a clear distinction between the first-time mothers before and after pregnancy. There was a reduction in the gray matter in the frontal lobe. And if you remember, the frontal lobe is the primary part of the brain that controls a more important cognitive skills in humans, such as emotional expression, problem solving, memory, language, judgment, and sexual behaviors. This was the brain's fine-tuning or maturation of the brain. The neuronal cell bodies in the gray matter of the frontal lobe mature and become specialized, while other cell bodies not needed as much post-baby are not specialized and they don't mature, which results in a decrease in the volume of the gray matter. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to my talk about labor and delivery.